Welcome to the Stars and Stripes Multifamily Apartment Investing Podcast, broadcasting from the three-country region of Switzerland, France, and Germany. Get ready to meet amazing industry rock stars and learn how they think, what they do, and what makes them successful. Now, here's your host and investor, Marcel T. Rutz.
Welcome, everybody. And today we have a new guest. Very excited to have him. His name is Josh Plave. He's the founder of Wall2 Main and a full-time multifamily investor. He's holding a portfolio of over 1,500 units across 7 markets. Josh is a GP. 10 properties spanning 800 units. So Josh is experienced in retirement accounts. He began at 16 when he opened his first Roth IRA and began trading equities. So I'm very excited to have him here. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey Marcel, thanks so much for having me.
First question to you, Josh. Where are you located right now?
I now live in Charlotte, North Carolina. My wife and I just moved here from Denver, Colorado, actually, about a year ago since our daughter was on the way and she's now been born. So we're here in the markets that I'm closer to and we're near our family as well. So loving it so far.
Hey, that's cool. So your daughter was just, how old is she?
She's about to turn 10 months.
Oh, nice. Congratulations. That's great. So you're still more focused on the daughter, family, or also you have time yet for multifamily?
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I like about it is I specifically, one of the reasons I went into this line of business a few years ago is I knew I wanted this time, opportunity. I knew if I was going to grow a family, I wanted to be at home. I wanted to have the opportunity to jump upstairs, downstairs, and hang out with my daughter while I'm in the middle of work. So I try to split my time as best as I can.
It seems like freedom is important for you. So tell us a little bit about your school, growing up. How did you start investing in real estate? Yeah,
it's a good question. I guess since I kind of talk a bit about retirement accounts, I'll start back to then. You had mentioned that I opened my first account when I was 16. So I had just a bit of money that I had earned that in a summer in between school. And I knew I wanted to I didn't need it at the moment. So I knew I wanted to put it away and opened up a retirement account at the time. Ended up going to college. I went to Northeastern University in Boston. And then from there, I ended up kind of just doing the usual corporate jobs and worked within, big data analytics and kind of just processed a lot of numbers in Excel and everything, which luckily, lent to my future career in multifamily. So it allows me to properly underwrite and understand how to, model out our projections. But kind of going forward, I ended up, just essentially growing tired of putting in the work and not necessarily seeing the day-to-day changes in all the effort I was making. So I knew for the longest time, real estate had been in my mind. And so I knew I wanted to make that shift. And if I was going to do it, I wanted to kind of do it in a very specific or concentrated way and know exactly where I was headed. So I kind of did what I would call a self-taught curriculum where I tried to find out as much as I could about every single sector and asset class that I could possibly do. And eventually, everyone kept on saying, you eventually want to scale, you want to get to multifamily someday, or you want to get to commercial real estate. So found out that it's not too difficult to start off with that. So I just kind of jumped in directly into multifamily.
So you mentioned the IRA. Can you tell us what is the IRA?
Yeah, so in America, we have some tax-deferred retirement accounts. And essentially, you put funds in them, and then anything that, when they grow within that account, the gains within them are not taxed. There's 2 different types. One gets taxed afterwards. Once you pull the money out, it gets taxed as income. The other one, you pay income up front. Then you don't have to pay any taxes while it's gaining, and then you don't have to pay any taxes when you take the funds out. So I've had these accounts for quite some time. And when I started moving into real estate, I found out that, a lot of people, and myself included when I was younger, they believe that because they're these kind of these tax deferred kind of government, they have these regulations surrounding them, that they're only allowed to invest within the stock market. And it turns out you can invest in literally almost any single asset class you want, very few restrictions. So you can take that account and put it into anything you like.
So do you need to be employed? You have to be self-employed, or is this relevant?
Yeah, there's a couple different types. There are 401ks, IRAs. There's different types of retirement accounts. IRAs, you don't have to be employed. You have to earn income to be able to contribute that year. So if you make $5,000 for the year, you can put $5,000 into an IRA. There are 401ks. 401ks are sponsored by an employer. And so, you would typically have a job. There are self-employed 401ks where you yourself could kind of sponsor yourself, a plan for yourself. Different flavors.
And the good thing is you can, for example, decide you want to do it with real estate. While in Switzerland or in other countries in Europe, you have to basically give it to Wall Street.
No, you're able to invest your IRA in virtually anything you'd like. There's just some small limitations. You can't invest it in things like collectibles, like art, jewelry, cars, alcohol, things like that. You can't buy life insurance policies. And then just because of the tax structure, you can't invest into any businesses that are structured as an S Corp. Outside of that, if you think, I've heard of people investing in horse racing groups and, all kinds of things in between. If you think it's going to make your account money, then you can place your capital there.
2021 was an amazing year for you, right? It took off, right? You closed on a 1,200 unit. So you are actually a GP syndicator. So let me ask you, what are you uniquely trying to do? Why are you the one to do it? And what's in it for me, as a LP, to go on the ride with you?
So kind of my specialty does surround retirement accounts because, I myself, we might get into it at a certain point, but I started off as a passive investor with retirement accounts. And so I ultimately ended up finding out, certain structures and ways that deals were best aligned for retirement accounts, for any kind of tax deferred account. So I ended up building myself something called, there's a bit of a tax involved when you start to invest into a leveraged opportunity. So if you're investing in, real estate, you're most likely going to be taking out a loan of some sort. And that's going to incur some amount of tax within a tax deferred vehicle. So it's one of the small complications, but I ended up, the phrase is called UBIT. It's unrelated business income tax, but to better understand kind of how it was going to impact my own investments, I ended up building a UBIT calculator. It took a ton of time, but I kind of wanted to see, hey, if I'm able to leverage up my retirement account, I place it into multifamily, what will the impact be? If returns are going to be 15 or 20% annualized, how much is it going to be knocked down by this UBIT tax? So I ended up building that at first for myself. And then when I started realizing that I could kind of search and find properties for my investors that were specifically retirement aligned, I now use that UBIT calculator in addition to our general underwriting process. I put all that together and I'm able to kind of validate certain deals as ones that are better aligned for retirement accounts. They have, higher IRR. We try to target investments that will be able to, force appreciation early on. Maybe there's a lot of value add that needs to be done in the early stage. And then if we can refinance the property, we can return some of the investors' originally invested capital back to them somewhere, halfway through the deal. So finding certain structures that work best for any kind of tax deferred investor is kind of the specialty that I'm focusing on.
Interesting.
Visit www.usmultifamilyrealestate.com to meet like-minded people with a focus on B and C class underperforming apartments in uptrending U.S. markets that can be repositioned toward the rapidly growing workforce. This is housing using a community lifestyle management approach.
So, Josh, interesting guy you are. And can you tell us a little bit about your investment strategy with multifamily properties?
Yeah, so we're primarily targeting, we're not reinventing the multifamily wheel here. Mm-hmm. We're mostly looking for assets that are kind of in that generally going to be A- to a C+ range. And, they're ones that most likely they're not going to be in a bad state, but they're most likely going to be kind of ignored by the current owner to a degree. They're not rough, but they maybe have outdated finishes, and it's a process where we can come in and replicate a business plan that we've gone through and successfully undertaken in previous projects. So we're looking for things that are 1970s and newer build. We know generally what the construction is like in those properties, what we need to do, the types of trims and appliances and different things that are desired by that tenant class. And so we're trying to bring it to a better level and really focusing on that forced appreciation where we can improve the livability and the desire for tenants to live on property.
So you are an experienced investor, real estate investor in retirement accounts. Do you have a story to tell us about and some lessons learned?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of started off, the reason that I ended up learning so much about retirement accounts, when I was a little younger, my grandfather and my mother, both a couple years apart, had passed away. And so they were fortunate enough, they were very kind, and they left their retirement accounts to myself and my sisters. And so it wasn't like a life-changing amount of money, but it was enough that I knew I needed to kind of take care of what they had built up during their lives, and make sure that I wasn't going to kind of throw it on the first thing that looked really attractive. I needed to kind of really dig in and figure out how to best utilize the opportunity and what they had left for us. So I ended up gaining the experience by realizing, hey, I didn't know I could take these IRAs and I could leverage them and use them in real estate. I thought I could only invest their cash value. So once I figured that out, I started to look at all the different details. I wanted to know all of the questions I didn't know I needed to ask. So I needed to kind of find all the different things that were completely unknown to me. And it took a really long time. I realized that there wasn't one kind of central repository of answers and questions and answers and different information. So I ended up kind of learning from different people who provide services and accounts within the space. And the tricky part in there is that a lot of them, they kind of have self-serving interests, and they're trying to sell a certain type of account or a product to you. So I kind of needed to weed through a lot of that and find, some more of the honest voices and just more of the depth. People were sometimes only telling part of the story because they wanted to sell something that applied to that part of the story, but not the rest of it. And so it took me about 1.5 to 2 years to actually go through and find as much as I possibly could. And that's kind of what I put together on my website. I first and foremost, when I put it up, I actually hoped it was going to be kind of like an educational platform for folks. But yeah, ultimately, the entire value of it was I was searching for all of the questions I had no clue that I needed to ask.
Interesting. So all this wealth of knowledge that you mentioned in, these 2 years of learning, and also the calculator you mentioned, where can our listeners, get some information? Your website.
Yeah, my website is it's called wall2main.com. We've got education on both multifamily, but as well as doing so with retirement accounts. I even have a free PDF folks can check out. It's the top 10 tips and tricks when using your retirement account to invest in multifamily. So hopefully there's ways that people can understand what they can do and how they can best make use of their capital they have available to them right now.
Hey Josh, why aren't more people actually using self-directed IRAs? What do you think?
It's honestly, it's an exposure thing. There's just not enough folks speaking about it, and there's a lot of marketing efforts that are kind of suppressing some of the self-directed retirement account space. There are trillions of dollars held within these retirement accounts across America. And most of it's held at the really large banks, Fidelity, Vanguard, these really large companies that specialize in selling equities. And so, rightfully so, they're marketing their services to invest in the stock market. And so it's just harder to kind of get the word out on a smaller scale when certain other custodians have smaller marketing budgets. But, I've tried explaining it to as many folks in my personal life, not even just investors, but, my family and friends, and trying to, get them to come along for the ride as well.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, you can pull it out from Vanguard and then put it in real estate. So is this correct?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as the account kind of isn't held at a current employer, most employers, if it's an employer-sponsored plan, they want to have control over that account because they have lower fees and they gain some benefit from having more assets under management at the company. But if it's something from a past employer or it's an account you started yourself, you can move it from really any bank or custodian and move it over into a self-directed account.
Why would I put it in multifamily investments with self-directed IRA?
Well, there's a number of reasons, and my two favorite are really the first one, as I mentioned before. When I learned that I could apply leverage to my retirement account, it was this gigantic light bulb moment for me. Noticing that I could, take my returns and leverage them up was just, it put a new perspective on my future for me, and kind of what I could focus on and what I could achieve in the kind of future I could develop for myself and my family was really important. But then the other one, the most obvious one that I like, is the fact that it's a retirement account. It's meant, you're not really going to have access to it until you're 50, 60, 70 years old, whatever it might be, with the regulations wherever you live. And, if you don't have access to it, then there's not necessarily a need to have it in a liquid asset. So if you're investing in stocks, that's great. But a lot of times people investing in commercial real estate, they sometimes have a hesitancy on, okay, this is a 5 or 6 year deal. I might not see the money come back to me for a while. But when it comes to retirement accounts, I've never actually had those concerns with my investors because they realize I'm not touching it for 15, 20, 30 years anyways. I don't mind a longer length for the investment as long as it has the right returns track that I'm looking for.
Interesting. And you also have a blog, for example, what I read on your website is the 7 reasons foreign investors love U.S. real estate. And can you tell us quickly, in 30 seconds, why U.S. real estate?
Yeah, I'll try in 30 seconds. It's, I think a lot of it comes from the great variety, not just in the markets themselves. Obviously everyone knows there's all kinds of different markets with different laws and everything, but there's different asset classes too. There's not just multifamily, there's self-storage, there's all sorts of different places that you can invest in, real estate, commercial real estate within America, and they all have incredibly favorable lending terms that aren't necessarily available in a lot of other countries. And so you're looking at a relatively stable market for real estate that has long-term projected secured assets where, you have 10-year loans on the property and you have an opportunity to really kind of figure out where you're going with the business plan and not falter and have to kind of sell the property because you ran out of time or anything. So I saw an interesting, I know I'm longer than 30 seconds, but I saw an interesting study that had been done, I think a decade or two ago. And it kind of just summarized that commercial real estate in America has equity-like returns with bond-like stability. So it's got kind of that nice pairing, and it's no huge ups or downs. It just kind of consistently chugs right along.
Okay. Do you have any favorite quote?
Yeah. So, not any one particular quote, but I have a concept that I really try to live by. It's kind of like a quote, but it's really just focusing on one thing at a time. I think a lot of people do this when they kind of go down the entrepreneurial path. They try focusing on everything. They try to get everything done all at once. They have great vision, a lot of ideas. And so I was trying to find deals. I was trying to network. I was trying to meet investors, build, an investor database. And it took a lot. It took a lot out of me, and I wasn't able to give 100% to any one specific activity. And so once I started focusing on finding properties specifically that are retirement aligned, and I didn't try to go and deviate from that path and focus on other ideas that I had, and I left them, until I was able to kind of perfect one thing. I was able to give 100% for that one activity until, I got the finished product that I wanted, and then I could move on to the next thing and do that to 100% as well.
Yeah, that's very good said. And what would you recommend then a listener to focus on right now if they're, for example, new to that real estate?
There's that phrase, analysis paralysis, but I am a huge fan of just educating yourself as much as you possibly can. Focus on podcasts, books, webinars, Zoom meetups, anything. Like I said earlier, just trying to find out those questions that you don't know to answer are so critical. A lot of us are inquisitive and we have things we want to learn and questions to ask, but there's so much involved in real estate and so many things to learn. I'm learning every day still, and just trying to find other people who know they're providing answers for questions you didn't even know to ask is the number one key thing to growth.
And so, for example, like somebody's also even struggling when they're like, so there's so many stuff in the real estate, like you mentioned before. What would you recommend to focus on in the real estate?
It's a really interesting question. I would say focus on first, see what your personal character traits are, what you're best at. Are you analytical? Are you outgoing? Do you have charisma? What do you think you do best? Don't try to climb uphill. Try to work best to your personality. And, if you're chatty and you like talking to people, you'll want to go talk to brokers and find deals, and you'll be able to network well. I first got involved in acquisitions because by nature, I'm extremely analytical. I'm actually fairly introverted, and I kind of wanted to sit on my computer and crunch numbers. Mm-hmm. So focusing, on what allows you the most growth, and it gives you the opportunity to go out from there.
But I think you then also need to team up, right? With somebody else.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I completely missed. It's I would be nowhere without the teammates who help me find deals, perform due diligence with me, have different, when it comes to managing the asset. I don't have a construction background, but I'm partnered with someone who does, and listening to them on our calls and hearing about, their knowledge in everything, how to, fix pipes and issues with, drainage, with water. And stuff I would never have an idea of how to accomplish. So it's really important to fill those different pieces with people who have that experience.
So your first step would be read, for example, a good book and then meet people. So let's go back to the book. Do you have a book recommendation?
Yeah. So the book that's made the most impact on me was a book called Blue Ocean Strategies. And so what it really focuses on is, when we have ideas and we want to start something, start a business, or invent a product or whatever it might be, there are a lot of spaces that are already highly saturated. So let's look at like toothpaste, for example. There are big companies that are there. New toothpaste comes in, and they're focusing all on the exact same consumers, the same customers. You can't expand the market. The market is what it is. People need toothpaste, and we're not going to find new people that aren't using toothpaste. But then there are different companies that are coming out, and they're able to kind of create a new industry of itself, maybe marrying two different things. Cirque du Soleil is a great example of it, where they married theater, opera, circus, and they were able to kind of bring people in who were interested in maybe a couple different, entertainment aspects and wouldn't have, someone who was interested in circus might not have been interested in ballet, but there they are seeing it. And so they kind of created their new market that they could capitalize on, that they could make the most of. And so it's about finding those ideas that and ways to find those ideas for things that are, that are unaddressed, essentially.
Interesting. So when I read that book, for example, I would want to then take action. And what would you recommend? What should I do? I mean, I go repeat your website again, please.
Yeah, the website is wall2main.com. The book itself is geared towards nothing that I do. It inspired me greatly, though, and helped me kind of develop the vision for what I do and the education that I provide.
Yeah. So I read the book. I can contact you if I have any questions, right? And what would you recommend as next, for example, if I want to join a networking group, or what could you recommend on that part, to take action?
Yeah, it's been very different during COVID times. I went from networking just in person to now doing these Zoom meetups, and there's so many out there. You can sit on your couch and meet a bunch of people. And what I would say is find the sector, the industry that you're interested in either becoming an active or even a passive investor in. And there's going to be meetups. There's going to be different groups centered around that specific asset class that you're interested in. And just hop on those, learn from those people, hear their stories, and you'll benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Josh, how about your future outlook? Like, how will you grow your company, or what's the plan?
Yeah, so the plan for now is to continue with multifamily. We have 1,500 units in our portfolio, so hopefully growing that to 4,000 to 5,000 units. And then from there, pivoting into different asset classes, I think is important to kind of diversify, hopefully moving into self-storage. I know there's going to be a huge senior housing boom coming up in the next 10, 15, 20 years here in America. So eventually pivoting to that, and then certain more passive asset classes as I move forward in life, just kind of finding the right type of asset for the right stage of everyone's life, I think is really important.
That sounds great. Hey, Josh, it was fantastic talking to you. You are a wealth of knowledge, and it was really fun having you here at the show. And I hope, hopefully one day I can meet you in person. Josh, thanks a lot for being here, and hope to keep in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good to talk with you.
Thank you, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Danke, dass du reingeschaut hast bei Stars and Stripes, deine US-Immobilienshow. Melde dich an für diesen Podcast, hinterlasse eine Review und vernetze dich mit Marcel auf deiner Lieblings-Social-Media-Plattform.